Hello Final Fantasy fans, and welcome back to another top 5 video. Today we're going to be talking about Ice, and I want to make an additional disclaimer on top of the disclaimer that's already here is, if I could make this list, it'd be 2 cards, and the rest I don't really care about, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I really feel like the first 2 are just leagues above the rest of the cards. Again, we're looking for individually strong cards, or how much they're going to be doing for the deck that they're in. So you kind of give it away, it's Genesis that's going to be starting it up for us. So it's a 4-drop, 7,000, it's going to be an 8,000 in your Ice decks. Comes into play, you get to dull and freeze something. So it's always great for getting in that additional point of damage if you've played something the previous turn, or just making it so on your following turn you can get an additional point of damage when needed. However, what really makes Genesis is the additional effect that you can always threaten the discard effects, and Ice is really strong at this, and maybe then you're following it up with Sid or some other cards that get value out of your opponent having no cards in hand, but Genesis really does it all. You know, in my mind, this is the strongest card in Ice for what it wants to be doing, and it's really no surprise because for how much play it's been in Mono Ice, Fire Ice, Lightning Ice especially, really loves this card. So Genesis is really going nowhere. It's came in Opus 3. I'm sure it's going to be played in the next set, and I think we can all agree this is probably going to be one of your favorite Devout targets that's currently in the game. Speaking of Devout, and this is absolutely my second pick, and everyone who knows what decks I've been building with Ice and how far I've been going with it, Devout is my kind of MVP to go to. The utility that it gives you by bringing back any 4 cost from your break zone. Again, let's replay Genesis. Let's replay the Al Cid to get the Onion Knight out of our hand. There's so much that this card can do for you. And yes, you can get a 3-drop or a 2-drop if you really need it in a pinch. And it does have the restriction that's only during your turn, but that's perfectly fine. It lets Ice decks play those 1-of Veins. Just all around, this card is an all-star. And I'm fairly confident in saying that it's been played in every single deck, at least a 1-of that has played Ice since Opus 1. Could be wrong on that. I think it was played in every single one, but it is a card that I strongly recommend that you add to your list, even as a 1-of if you are playing a lot of foreign costs and lower forwards, just because of how much it can do. Going on beyond this, this is where it starts to get a little rough, so you guys will definitely have to leave something down in the comments below. Let me know what your kind of top picks are beyond the first 2. The summons are difficult, so you have 2 ways you can look at this. I personally picked Zalera. Again, this is kind of we talked about as a team. We also added in Okimoto for some discussion. They all picked Shiva. I personally love Zalera, but I'll talk about Shiva first. It is just a 2-cost summon, dull 2 forwards. You can use it offensively, you can use it defensively. It allows you to play into things like Shiva into Jill, which can just be absolutely amazing as well. It can set up your Zalera play, so yes, by that mention, it probably gets the spot over Zalera, but overall, it's just a cheap, efficient summon that it's not played in every single Ice deck as a 3-of, so it doesn't get as much as love as maybe you'd expect, but it still does a considerable amount of work in those decks. And then Zalera for me is kind of just the all-star. I love this card in certain matchups, and if you watch some of our videos, I think currently the best that we've done is a 5-for-1 or 6-for-1 that this is killed on the opposing field. And if you get to pull that off in Ice, it really is just the best feeling in the world against Wind Water or some of those other decks that are really heavy on those 3 and 5 drops. Like Knights is another one that really likes, like the Steiner and the Ramza and those kind of costs. Getting rid of a deleted with it is fantastic. So yes, they have to be dulled, but if you're playing Ice, it's really not that hard of a thing to do ultimately. So Shiva or Zalera, I think they could go either way. Maybe these are just deserve to be 3 and 4. And again, these aren't necessarily in a order from best to worst or anything. We just wanted to include 5 cards that we felt were worth talking about and are going to see play kind of as we go forward. Beyond that, we did mention Jill. Another starter card like Rigdia, who's been seeing play since Opus 1. All the starter cards have been played more or less at some point. Maybe if you're just playing, if you really want to build a deck like, oh, I really want to play Final Fantasy X, well, you're playing those cards. So it's not like starter Tidus has seen a ton of play, but every single starter from that first set, if it's Tutor Jessie, we have Jill here, there's going to be some playability in it that it's worth picking them up. So that's kind of another note I'll add here. If you haven't already, and maybe it is cheaper, I don't know the current price of Jill to be fair, it might be a little bit cheaper to buy the singles for it, but just pick up the starter decks. You might want some of those other cards down the road, and it really is the only way to get them, and the good thing is you only need 1. So why is Jill great? It's an EX burst, it's a 2-cost, it can freeze 2 of your opponent's forwards, really putting them behind from a tempo perspective, and nothing feels sweeter than on your opponent's second attack, you hit a Jill and freeze both their guys, and suddenly they're going, oh crap, what am I going to do? I will say the one downside I have against Jill, because by this time we've all done it at least once, I've done it way more times than I like to admit, which is why, right or wrong, I've cut it down to 2 in a lot of cases. I hate having to play this card for no value. And because you're in ice, if you watched our set review, you're pretty limited on what you can do for your 2 costs. Yes, we got a ton more options in this most recent set, which is great. But there's still some hands where it's like, well, I can do literally nothing on this turn, or I can play this Jill for no value and just hope I get the S effect off later. So yes, outside of kind of that one instance, which you're going to remember the bad times more often than the times you got like the EX burst of the S, sure. But I think it's still worth mentioning. It absolutely deserves this slot. Just don't be afraid to, if the rest of your hand makes sense, just to play it for no value. But man, it does not feel that great. And then the last card, which I got a lot of slack for, and yes, I kind of realize it breaks the own rule that I want cards that are individually strong, and Rinoa really requires you to have a board set up to support her, but I think for what it does, it's worth mentioning here. The idea that you can just, if you get to that mid to late game, maybe you have 2 or 3 forwards on the field, they're at 4 or 5 points of damage, you can just always swing with Rinoa for the rest of the game saying, look, I have these other guys, you can maybe chump block this, and great, maybe I'll get through the damage the next turn. But if this breaks, your entire field's going to be dulled, and the rest of these guys are getting in. I think for that reason, and for individually strong cards, I think she deserves a spot on the list. Now, yes, same thing that we mentioned in our previous video, Heroic Yuna is seeing a lot of play, so you don't get the go to the break zone effect, and there are going to be those caveats, but I still think that Rinoa, in the right meta, in the right matchups, it's going to be an absolutely insane card for you. And Wishing Star is usually not the most relevant. You usually just start playing this as a 2 of anyway, so you don't get to use it that often. But getting to choose a forward and a backup to dull and freeze can do its own rightful job in getting you in those extra points of damage, especially if they have something like a Prish that you just really need to get out of the way one way or another because they're just going to block you for infinity. You always have that option as well. So again, yes, we are playing into these special cards, or the cards that have special effects on them that are a little bit stronger than kind of your average card because they have that additional effect or layer built into them. But I really think that Rinoa gets the bonus here, and you know, not all that common right now given we got away from like the Squall and Laguna package, but she also does get bigger. So, you know, in the right deck, she can also just become a 10k very easily, and I've done that plenty of times where suddenly she's just her own threat in multiple ways. So I think Rinoa should, you know, get above some of these other honorable mentions. But with that, I know you're probably screaming in the background by now, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but I'll mention them here. Final Fantasy VI and what we gained out of Locke, Celeste, and Setzer really did help out Ice, and probably did the most for it, if we're being honest. However, all these cards require the other ones. So, I mean, if Setzer lets you get the other ones for their special effects, which are all very strong in their own right. So I get that, but I really didn't want to build out 3 slots for these 3 cards. I didn't feel that was necessarily right. However, they do get the kind of the honorable mention here saying, look, I get they're very strong. They're probably one of the best things going for them in Ice right now. It's just, you got to take 8 to 10 slots of your deck to do it. And yes, again, it's worth it, but that is 20% of your deck. That is a lot of room to dedicate to the Final Fantasy VI package. And maybe it's mono ice, maybe you're playing fire, so you can use like Cyan and stuff, get extra value out of it that way. There's certainly other things that you can be doing with it. However, I strongly feel that if we're, again, looking at this list, looking at kind of those individually strong cards that you get something out of them right away, I really think it's those other cards I mentioned. So that is the top 5 ice card. Let me know what you guys think. Did I hit all of them? Was there some that I glaringly missed? Let us know in the comments. And I really hope you guys have been enjoying this video series. We want to do something a little different while we have the summer series kind of going on, and before Opus 5 since we have a little bit of time. So want to mix it up a little bit. So if you guys like this video, make sure to drop us a like down below. It helps out a ton. Comment, of course, what cards we missed. And don't forget to subscribe for future 6 Sages gaming content with Final Fantasy trading card game. So on behalf of myself and the rest of the team, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video. Have a good one. This video made possible thanks to our Patreon supporters. Thank you to our honorary sages.